Hey everyone. So let's talk about curses. There are three types of curses: generational, caste, and earned curse. Everyone's always on social media, TikTok, looking at recipes on how to get rid of bad luck, but some of these things are just actual curses. And the first one we're going to focus on is a generational curse. And this is something that's passed down through your family bloodline. And I want you to think about when you go to the doctor and you're filling out paperwork to get seen by this doctor, what are one of the first questions they ask you on that paperwork or through the consultation is, what diseases did your father or mother have or had? And the reason for this is because most likely you're going to inherit those diseases as well, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, heart problems. Some of these things can be hereditary. And that can be considered a generational curse when it comes to diseases. Another example is a curse, generational curse, does not discriminate in any shape or form, whether you're from a rich family or a poor family or middle class, it doesn't matter. One example I love to use are the Kennedys. Very powerful, high-profile family, well-known. As you guys know, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. He was our president, assassinated in DFW many, many years ago. He had a sister, Rosemary. She had a lobotomy, or underwent a lobotomy procedure that left her pretty much handicapped. She was in a mental institution all the way up until she passed away. Let's not forget John F. Kennedy, his brother, Robert, was also assassinated. Joseph Kennedy, Jr., which is the oldest brother, he was also the first to actually pass. He was killed in a military combat in an aircraft. I don't know if it was in combat or it was just an aircraft crash. Then you have David, son of Robert Kennedy. He passed of an overdose. David, son of Robert, like I said, passed in an overdose. Mike Kennedy, son of Robert, passed in a skiing accident. Cara, which was the daughter of Ted Kennedy, she passed away pretty young too. And the urban legend was that Joseph Sr. Kennedy, he had a worker or a slave back in the day, and she was of African descent. And she got pregnant by him, and basically he molested her, and she placed a curse on the Kennedys for his wrongdoings and what he did. So that is an urban legend that's how the Kennedy curse started, was actually through a young woman that was African descent, and she knew the occult practice, so she placed a curse on the Kennedys. I don't know if that's true, but that many times, no one has that type of bad luck. And then there are 5 types of generational curses. The first one is addiction. So if somebody in your family was an alcoholic or a drug user, that can be passed down to you. Codependency can be passed down. Mental health issues. Obviously, no one wants to go through those things, and I have high respect for people who are going through these things and wishing you the best of health, but mental health issues can be passed down. Depression, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, things of that sort. That can be something that you pass down to your children. Relationships, that can be a curse. Maybe you come from a family that, maybe your mom was never able to establish a good relationship, so your relationships are always rocky, up and down. Maybe your dad was someone that was never really in the picture, so maybe you grew up seeing something like that, and maybe you're not in the picture with your kids. These things can obviously be changed. It's up to you, but that is a type of generational curse that does exist. Financial curses in your family. I read a story not that long ago where a woman was married to this guy that was very rich, but when he passed, he left behind a lot of debt. Then she got sick, she passed, then she left all that debt to her kids. Her kids then had all that debt on their hands, and then it just kept going down the line. And so it just continued a history of poverty. Physical alignments can be passed down genetically. Diseases such as cancer, sickle cell, hemophilia, dwarfism. Obviously, we don't want to pass these things down to our kids, but genetically, some of these things can be passed down, and some people see it as a curse. Abuse, trauma, those things, dysfunctional issues, those can be passed down to your kids. Like if you are in a very toxic environment and your children are exposed to this long enough, they too will adapt to these ways and then pass it down to their kids. There's epigenetic modification. So that's how your genes function, or your DNA responds to certain stress and anxiety and traumas. Thus can lead to diseases and problems mentally, both mentally and health-wise. So if you're around, let's say, a mom that's narcissistic, or a dad that went to war, maybe he has a lot of trauma, and then you're a kid, you're growing up seeing these things, obviously you're going to grow up with some kind of response to that, and it can be passed down. And these things can be cured, obviously, with some professional counseling and things of that sort, and sometimes they can't. My last example of a generational curse is going to be your parenting style. So you can transfer a toxic upbringing to your children if you don't identify it as you grow older, that it's not working or it's not healthy. So maybe your parents were not very expressive. I'll give you an example. I come from a family where hugs and kisses are not common. So when I was around families that hug and kiss each other when they see each other, I thought that was kind of weird, So obviously sometimes coming from a certain upbringing can bring you some issues and can make you think a certain way. And then your ways can be passed down to your children. And that, in a sense, is a type of curse. So a lot of people ask me, how do you get rid of generational curses? Well, like I said, obviously counseling. If you're in a traumatic, toxic environment, you have to identify those things and work on those things and changing those behaviors so your children or your descendants don't go through what you went. And then there's things like the example I used for the Kennedys, where let's just say you just come from a family where it's consistent bad strain of luck. People are passing away, people are always getting sick, there's a lot of poverty, just a lot of problems within your family. My suggestion is you get a reading, you connect with an occult practice. You don't have to initiate, you don't have to believe in it, but you do have to align with it in order to work with occult practices. And so, I take that back. You do have to believe in it in a way, otherwise it doesn't work. And you try to find out exactly what kind of curse it is that's affecting you, and how do you break that? What is that spirit that's lingering or attached to you that maybe you inherited from your family members? And how do you break that? It could be through a ritual. It can be through a cleanse. It can be through an offering. Several scenarios can take place when it comes to breaking a generational curse. I'll do my second video sometime this week on the other two types of curses that exist and some examples of them. And then in my final series of these type of topics, I'll talk about the types of witchcrafts that exist so you can be aware of it. And if you like this content, please, hit a like, place a comment if this is something or a subject that's something of interest to you, so I know what type of topics to keep sharing with you guys on educational purposes. Ashe, alafia y bendiciones.